This is Judge Joe Brown, and we're listening to We All Be News, news-free Dixie for the 21st century.
Mr. Sydnor, are you there?
I'm here.
All right, okay, great. Well, We All Be is proud to have on Brother Ron Sydnor. He is the lead historian and park manager of the Jefferson Davis Historic Site in Fairview, Kentucky. How you doing today, sir?
I'm doing fine. How are you doing?
I'm great. I can't complain. So I was just interested because I saw you a week ago at the Nathan Bedford Forrest celebration in Memphis, and I was just taken away by the fact that, number one, that you were a black man, a black historian at this event, and because I think it was like 700 white people there and in a majority black town, and I was like one of the few black folks outside of you, so I was surprised to see you there. And I thought your presentation was very informative, so I was very impressed with the presentation. So do you get a lot of, what type of responses do you get?
Well, for the most part, I get positive responses because the presentation I do is on Jefferson Davis, and I talk, as a matter of fact, the title of my presentation is Jefferson Davis, the Man, because I don't talk about his president years as a Confederate president. I talk about his birth up until he was elected president, and then from the fall of Richmond to his death. And I do that for a specific reason, because there was things that he did in his life before the Civil War ever happened that had a great impact on this country that our history books don't teach. And so it never fails that all these groups that I give a presentation to, you know, they come up to me, well, I did not know that about him. I didn't know he did that. I didn't know that. Mm-hmm. And so it's all. I've always received a positive reaction. You know, now I've had mixed reactions when people find out that I'm the manager of his birth site. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, some people would be upset that I am. Some people would start laughing and walk away, and some people would be elated that I am, and you know, they would say things like, "Well, it's about time that, you know, we did something like that." So it's kind of a mixed bag.
How did you end up being the manager of this site? What was the process?
Well, I'm a state employee. I work for the Department of Parks here in Kentucky, and I was the assistant manager of the largest resort park here in Kentucky, and my boss at the time, the position here was open, and she knew that I was a history major and retired military, and so she felt that I was the best fit for this job. And I really don't think she really understood what she was wanting to do when she did it. But she came to me and asked me if I would take the job, and I told her sure. And so that's how I got here.
I just want to ask. I've been doing some research on you. Like you're a very humble guy. You're a 20-year Marine veteran. I mean, you served in Vietnam, and also you got your bachelor's, I believe, in history from UC Berkeley. Correct?
Correct.
So, I mean, you're very educated. You're a true public servant in every sense of the word. So I'm also curious as well. Are you also a member of the Sons of Confederate Veterans?
No, I'm not. I'm not a member of them. The group that's associated with my park, the Jefferson Davis Birthplace Camp, you know, they are trying to get me to join, and I haven't joined them yet. But I'm considering it because on my father's side, my great grandfather was an officer in the Confederate Army, and he married a black lady, and that's where our side of the family started from.
So your ancestor, he was actually a white Confederate veteran and married a black lady? Okay, I want to ask you this as well, because I think it's fascinating, because the only reason I asked you that part because somebody told me you was a member at the Sons of Confederate Veterans at the gathering in Memphis. Well,
no, not yet. And like I say, the birthplace camp here, because I attend their meetings every month, because you know, they are associated with the park and everything. So I represent the park at their meetings, and so they're wanting me to join them, which I'm considering doing. I mean, they're a great group of guys. I've known them for the 5 years I've been here, and they're a great group of guys. So I'm very seriously considered joining them. Yes.
Yeah, I actually this as well. 'Cause, I mean, it's like you're very comfortable around a lot of white people. I mean, in those situations, are there any other members of color? Are there members of color in that group of the Sons of Confederate Veterans?
In the group that I'm associated with, no, there's not. However, as a whole, different places around the country in the South, there are African Americans that are in the Sons of Confederate Veteran groups. I have met several of them.
Okay, that's interesting. I think people don't know. I mean, I think that this interest was going on right now with this backlash against the Confederate flag and everything Confederate. What happened in South Carolina yesterday, and I've been telling people myself, I've been to Charleston a couple of times, that, that Confederate history is really black history as well. Would you say that's accurate?
Yes, it is. We can't separate our history from it. Our history is intertwined with it, and no matter how much we try, it can't be separated. So, it's just, how we look at it. I mean, being a historian, I have to look at all history objectively, because if you don't look at it objectively, you can't tell the truth. When you get emotional and put personal feelings in it, then that's when everything starts getting blurred, and you lose focus on what the history is. So you got to try to view history objectively, and then when you try to view it objectively, you got to try to put yourself in the shoes of the people during their time, not during our time. So you got to try to think the way they thought then, and then you may be able to come close to getting the truth. And then the other thing is, you can't stop at what you learn in history books in high school. You have to go and do some research and look up primary sources and get into those primary sources, because that's where you're going to find the real truth at. Our history books does not do our history a great justice. So that's why I always tell people you've got to go and do some research on your own and look it up and look at primary sources and whatnot, and then you're going to get the truth of that history.
Right, this Cotton. I listened to your lecture last week in Forest Park. It seems like there's a little bit of Lincoln bashing in there. If I'm not mistaken. Like, do you cater your message towards a certain audience? Like, are you very mindful who you speak to, and do you kind of sometimes do the emotional baiting things? Like, they say, well, Lincoln was not a great soldier. Jefferson Davis was a consummate professional. Some of the stuff I'm paraphrasing. So do you do a little bit of Lincoln bashing in some of your presentations?
And I guess people could view it as that, but both men served during the Black Hawk Wars. Mm-hmm. Both men served under Zachary Taylor, and the things that I talked about Lincoln are all true things. Those things happen. So, and it may came across that way, but what basically I was trying to do is let people know that, even though, the thing that's going on right now, well, even before right now, because I've been giving these presentations now for 5 years. It always seems that the negative things on Davis, when those things are presented, nothing is said about it. For example, about debating, nobody says, okay, well, it seems like there's some Davis baiting going on. Nobody makes that statement about him. But the Lincoln thing, like I said, was all true. And what I was trying to do is make that comparison that we're human and we're not all at our best at times, if you will. Mm-hmm. Lincoln is gone down in history as a great president and everything, but before that, he had his problems too. And that's basically what the point I was trying to get across.
Okay, well taken. And also I want to ask you this as well, because I heard a lot of this at the Forrest Park event for Nathan Bedford Forrest, that the Civil War was not fought over slavery. Is that true? Is that accurate?
There were several things intertwined that caused the war. You can't put your finger on one thing and say that was the cause of the war. So you can't put your finger on slavery and say that was the cause of the war. You had slavery, you had economics, you had unfair taxation, states' rights. All those things intertwined is what brought about the cause of the war. So whereas slavery was in there, it wasn't the prime reason because everything was intertwined. For example, only 2% of whites in the South owned slaves. Mm-hmm. Okay. The other 98% of whites in the South was what we consider today dirt farmers. So they were scratching a living out of the dirt. So now in the North, you had people that was aggravated, and they were raising Cain because of people in the South getting rich off of free labor. Okay, so the government placed these high tariffs on Southern goods. Well, they didn't just place it on the 2%, they placed it on everybody. So now that 98% now, that's why they raised up, because now they can't take care of their families. So for them, it was economics. It had nothing to do, for them, it had nothing to do with slavery. It was economics. And then now you got this high tariff that's been placed on Southern goods without any representation from them on these tariffs. So the same thing the forefathers separated from England from was unfair taxation. Well, now here you got them feeling and believing that this is an unfair tax. And so, and according to what they were raised and taught by their ancestors, if something like that happened, then you had the right to rebel, just like their forefathers did. And then when you go back to the economic piece and slavery, now you look at the 2% that own slaves, right? Now, remember I said earlier, you got to think the way they thought back then.
Right.
Well, every history book in this country has taught us that slaves was considered chattel property. So now, if you view it as property, for those 2% now, it was economics. Even though they were slaves, but for them, it was economics because it was property.
Wow. And also, it was a Confederate memorial that was recently defaced or vandalized, I believe, in North Carolina. And it made mention that the Civil War, a paraphrasing here, was an Anglo-Saxon cause. But in reality, was it really an Anglo-Saxon cause? I mean, I look at the Confederacy, you had all types of people involved in that, correct, in that cause.
Oh, yeah. You had black soldiers fighting for the Confederacy. Mm-hmm. And when you start talking about the race thing and all of that, well, you look at the black soldiers that fought for the North. Mm-hmm. Look how they got treated by white soldiers, okay? They got treated just as bad by their white counterparts as the blacks in the South was being treated. The only difference was they weren't being beaten and hung or anything like that, but they was treated very badly. Then when they were allowed to come into the Army, okay, it was all black units, but they had white officers, and they got paid $3 less a month than their white counterparts. Mm-hmm. Now, you go to the South, whereas if you look at it from a federal stance, they weren't allowed to be in the Confederate Army from a federal sense. However, each state allowed them to be in their state militias, because the one thing that Davis stood for, even when he was in Congress and a senator, was states' rights. So the federal government, if you will, for the Confederacy, couldn't tell a state who or who they could not have in their armies. So blacks fought for the armies of the different states. Stonewall Jackson has blacks in his army. So there's numerous different accounts of blacks serving in state armies. In North Carolina, you had 2 regiments that was captured, and there's documentation that there were black soldiers in those armies on the prison rolls that was in those armies. You have a Jewish Confederate soldier who was a sculptor, and the first monument to the Confederacy in Arlington Museum is a sculpture that he did depicting blacks and whites in the Confederate Army marching shoulder to shoulder in ranks. And not only did they serve together in the same unit, but they got paid the same amount of money. They didn't get paid less than their white counterparts. So when you look at it, you got them serving, shoulder to shoulder with their white counterparts, getting paid the same amount of money, but yet in the North, they can't serve shoulder to shoulder with their white counterparts and they're getting paid $3 less.
Yeah, I also actually just so you said Stonewall Jackson. So was the South first to use black soldiers in the war? Were they the first to utilize black soldiers?
Yes, they used black soldiers before the North did, yes. As a matter of fact, there was 2 officers from a New Jersey unit that complained that they had been attacked by Confederate cavalry, and over 700 black soldiers was in that cavalry. And they went on to complain that if they can serve with blacks, why can't we serve with blacks too?
Oh, wow. That's very fascinating. And that's what I think is interesting right now, what's going on with the pushback. That this is a learning opportunity, a learning moment for people, especially people of color, black people in this country, about this history. And how many black Confederates were there as far as soldiers?
Well, there was over 90,000 that served in the Confederate Army, but only about 15,000 saw what they call the elephant, which meant they actually saw combat. Now, what happened was in late 1864, there was a push to conscript blacks in the Confederate Army, and Jefferson Davis went to Robert E. Lee and asked him what he thought about it, and Robert E. Lee told him, said, yes, not only do I think we should conscript them in the Army, but I also believe that we should offer them gradual freedom. So emancipation, gradual emancipation or freedom. So Robert E. Lee, was for conscripting them. As a matter of fact, Robert E. Lee, a little later on in 1865, made the statement, had we conscripted blacks in the Army at the beginning, the outcome might have been different. Even Frederick Douglass told Abraham Lincoln that there are black soldiers fighting for the South right now. They have rifles on their shoulders, bullets in their pockets, and if you don't allow the blacks to fight for the North, they'll run away back to the South and fight for the South.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. Also, from my understanding, we also had, I just think this is into the slavery issue in the Civil War, because you also had black folks that owned slaves, correct, and Native Americans too?
Now say that again?
You also had black people that owned slaves and Native Americans as well?
Yes. As a matter of fact, there was a unit called the Louisiana Native Guard, which was an all-black unit from top to bottom. Their officers were black, everybody was black. And they were free blacks, very prosperous blacks in New Orleans, and they owned slaves. And they formed a militia, and then they went to Jefferson Davis to let him know they wanted to fight for the Confederacy. And of course, a lot of the slaveholders went to Davis and told him, no. And so Davis told them, well, we don't need you. And so, they went back home, and But the reason, and they sent an article to the newspaper in New Orleans and told them why they wanted to fight for the Confederacy, because they believed that if the North won, they would lose their way of life. So all the privileges and everything, and the businesses and all that stuff that they had, they believed that they would lose it, and that's why they were. And then also the blacks that fought for the South, and even those blacks, the Native Guard, they also believed that they were fighting for their country.
Okay.
Yeah. See, back then, states was viewed as countries.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so they viewed they were fighting for their country, so they had loyalty to the country. Even though they were enslaved, and some of them wasn't enslaved, they still believed that there was a country, and they had loyalty to their country. Same way we did here today. We fight for the blacks fight in the military today for the same reason, for equality. And back then it was for freedom, which bore out as equality. And so we fight today with the hopes that when we come back home, we would have better equality. So nothing has changed over time with that. And see, then you also have to look at the blacks fighting for the South from this standpoint too, right? If the blacks that were still in the South supported the North, and in their view, in their way of thinking, if they supported the North and the South won, then their lot in life just got worse. But if they supported the South and the North won, well, first of all, if they supported the South and the South won, their lot would get a whole lot better. But if they supported the South and the North won, then they knew that they were going to be freed anyway. So it was a win-win situation for them to fight for the South, because they all couldn't run away. If they were enslaved, they all couldn't run away, right? So they had to do something, and so they supported the South. And for those very reasons, it was a win-win situation for them. And then you had cases like Nathan Bedford Forrest.
Okay. Nathan
Bedford Forrest went to 45 of his slaves and told them, if you fight for me, I will free you, win, lose, or draw. Okay? Now, a lot of those slaves ended up in his escort and guard unit, which was like a special services type unit. As a matter of fact, they were called the Green Beret. Okay? And whenever there was a task that was real hard and stuff like that, he would send a 120-man force in there, and they would just dog it out until they got it taken care of. And they had the best horses, they had the best uniforms, the best weaponry, the best food. He took care of them. Well, a lot of those slaves that he freed to fight for him was in that unit. And Nathan Bedford Forrest himself, after the war, said the best fighters he ever saw was those soldiers that he had fighting for him, those black soldiers. So yeah, they fought in the South for the same reason the ones that ran away to the North fought, and that was for freedom.
Oh, wow. So this is all fascinating. I'm glad you brought Nathan Bedford Forrest. What are your thoughts about him? I know you said what you just said about him with the black soldiers, but a lot of black folks don't care too much about Nathan Bedford Forrest. I mean, it's just growing up here in Memphis, you hear things, and I know I read things about him and his involvement in the Fort Pillow Massacre, and even probably being the first Grand Wizard of the KKK. So what are your thoughts about Nathan Bedford Forrest?
Well, see, the thing is, the Fort Pillow thing, I mean, in the fog of war, things happen that shouldn't happen. And I'm not, and don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to defend him on what happened at Fort Pillow, because Fort Pillow was an atrocity. But as far as the KKK goes, when he was with the KKK, when they started the KKK, when he was there, it was started as a police force. Because what happened was the carpetbagger and the scalawags was treating the people in the South very poorly. and there was no law or anything around to stop it. So that's why they formed it. Now, over the next 5 or 6 years, as the 3 or 4 years, as the soldiers started coming back from the war and started joining the KKK and turned it into what we know it to be today, he stepped out of it. He said, "That's not what I envisioned," and he stepped out of it. And then he became an advocate for blacks. He spoke up for blacks. As a matter of fact, the national black pole bearers, who were the forerunners for the NAACP, he was a guest speaker for them, and he talked to them about how everybody should be on equal ground. Everybody should have the opportunity for jobs and education, in regards to who they were or who they are. So, as a matter of fact, he got a standing ovation at that venue, and had a black lady bring him a bouquet of roses and presented them to him and everything. And here's this guy, that today we demonize him as being a member of the KKK, but yet back then, blacks didn't have a problem with him because he was fighting for their rights as well.
So would it be accurate to call him a civil rights hero, though? I mean, you put him the same level as Dr. King?
I wouldn't say he was on the same level as Dr. King, but it has been speculated and suggested that his involvement in that was akin to civil rights.
What about him being a prolific violator of humanity as far as being a prolific slave trader? I mean, making his money as a millionaire off of the trading of slaves or human beings. What about that part of his legacy?
Well, yeah, and like I say, in the beginning and everything, that's what he did. That's how he made his living. But when the war came and he freed those slaves, he got out of that business when he did all of that. I mean, you can't you can't not say that. Well, he was this bastion for humanity when he did own slaves.
Right.
But if you put it all in perspective, from that period back, all of your leaders own slaves.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying? So Thomas Jefferson owned slaves. George Washington, all those people own slaves. Okay, but we don't say anything about them in their slave ownership because they become these great historic figures in our history. And only, it's one of those things where the winners get to write the history, and then they get to demonize their opponents. I would wonder how your Thomas Jeffersons and your George Washingtons and everything would have been seen throughout history if they'd lost.
That's a good question. Also, U.S. Grant, he owned 13 slaves, right, through his wife?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and he was the leader of the Union cause, right? He was their general.
Yes.
So,
right.
I just think it is a complex thing when you start thinking about, but also, who gets this? Who controls the narrative? That's my concern. So even with Nathan Bedford Forrest, well, actually, I saw people out there saying it's about heritage, not hate. And I'm saying, why did they move his body from Elmwood Cemetery and put that big imposing statue there in 1905? Was it really all about this heritage? And also, I looked at the Confederate flag. What it's been used for. People say, well, the Klan used the American flag to march on Washington, but also they used the Confederate flag as a means to intimidate black folks at the voting polls. This is back in the 40s and 50s and 60s. So, why can't people understand from a black point of view why this could be offensive to some black people or older black people?
Right. Yeah. See, and that's the thing, and the problem is there's education that needs to happen on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
Where people are saying this is my heritage, not hate, da 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 da. Well, but you also have to understand on the other side what it represents to the people on the other side as well. And when you got people not wanting to open their minds to receive information, then it's hard to get that information across. But my goodness, there's a whole lot of education that needs to happen. And I believe that if we can get that education to happen, and people get a better understanding, a better perspective, and I mean, you hit the nail on the head. It's a complex thing, and it's going to be very difficult to change a lot of minds, and maybe the goal is not to change minds per se, but to make people aware of what different groups of people went through, and what different groups of people are experiencing now, that will allow us then the ability to respect each other and to be able to sit down and talk to each other. And then hopefully through that venue, a change will occur.
I hope so. I look at the thing, but I always tell people, to me, that racism and white supremacy is white people problem. It's not really a black person problem. We can't really solve it. It's something they need to work out among themselves. But also, like I told Lee Miller, the speaker for the Sons of Confederate Veterans, I said, you got this statue with this guy's remains. There's a couple blocks away from here is where they ran Ida-B-Wells Barnett out of town. Her birthday was just on, I think, Thursday, July the 16th. And also from a couple blocks from there, you had the assassination of Dr. King by the system of white supremacy. So to have this man under the way he was with several hundred whites, like normally we see that many white folks get around with just a few black folks, there's a lynching going on. And Memphis would be home for lynching. That's why Ida-B-Wells Barnett wrote about it, got ran out the South. So to talk about this is really about history. Well, let's learn all the history. Let's put up statues of Ida-B-Wells and other people as well who have fought and sacrificed for the cause of humanity, who knew that Black Lives Matter back then before there was hashtags and social media. I mean, and also the Confederate flag, like we just talked about, how you brilliantly laid out, is also part of Black history. You talk about Black participation in the war on both sides. I mean, you also had Black folks that rode with Jesse James and Cultural Raiders up in Missouri. So, I mean, you got all this stuff that we don't know about and they don't know about. So I think it's disingenuous when I hear them say it's about heritage, not hate, but they don't learn the whole story. Or they try to say, right. And I want to ask this as well. I think it's very important. Could America exist without the institution of slavery, the way it was done?
I believe it could have. Because it was doing well before slavery came along. I mean, we had free blacks in this country before slavery ever came into being. Because we had blacks that came over on the indentured service thing and worked for 7 years and was given money in their own land. So when slavery came along, we had free blacks in this country already. So they worked well with their white counterparts until 1619 when slavery started. But yeah, I believe with the right mindset and everything, yeah, this country could have lived up to what it's supposed to stand for without all that stuff that happened. And Jefferson Davis and his brother Joseph Davis, they believed that the slaves would be free at some point. And so because of that, they believed that they needed to be educated so they could make a living for themselves. So they educated their slaves, believe it or not, against the chagrin of their white slaveholder counterparts. And not only did they educate them, but they allowed them to grow stuff and make stuff and sell it. They also allowed them to self-govern. So in other words, if a slave did something wrong, then the slaves themselves set up court and had the trial and everything. And the only time that Jefferson Davis and his brother Joseph would intervene is if the punishment was too light or too harsh. Now, not taken away from that it was horrific that they owned other human beings, but the thing that even under that construct, they allowed them certain amounts of freedom, and like I say, and they educated them because they believed that at some point the slaves were going to be free, and if they were free, they needed to be able to take care of themselves and make a living for themselves.
Now, was one of his slaves Isaiah Montgomery, the founder of Mound Bayou, Mississippi, Jefferson Davis, or his brother?
It might have been his brothers.
Okay.
Yeah. Davis had one slave by the name of Pemberton, and the other one, I can't remember his name now off the top of my head. Wilcox or something like that. Winston. But whenever Davis wasn't at home, when he was out doing his Congress stuff or Senator stuff or Secretary of War stuff, whenever he wasn't home, even when he was the president of the Confederacy, that black man ran his plantation. He didn't have a white overseer. The running of the plantation was left up to that black man. And you know, and one of the things I try to get people to understand is back during that time and before, as it is today, you know, you had racists, and it was probably more prevalent back then because, you know, you didn't intermingle the races like we do today, where we have, you know, the friendships we have with the different races today, amongst the different races today. Well, between black and whites back then, from the 19th century, the 18th century, the 17th and 16th and all that, you know, that was unheard of. You didn't do that. You know, and I tell people, Davis espoused that he didn't believe blacks and whites were equal, but so did Lincoln. Right. Lincoln said the same thing. So does that make Davis any more racist than Lincoln? And Lincoln had no great desire to free the slaves, because he even said that if I can preserve the Union without freeing a slave, then I will do so. So you got to look at how people thought back then and what their beliefs were back then. And you know, if you do that, you will come to realize that the majority of people back then were racist. You know, and you know, you probably had the abolitionists that probably had the people that if you said somebody white wasn't a racist, then it more probably been amongst those abolitionists. It wouldn't have been amongst those other folks. You know, you had the people in the North who were some of all the slaves, the poor slaves, they need to be freed and da-da-da-da-da. But yet when they were asked if they could come to the North and live in their community, goes, oh, no. They even passed black codes so that blacks couldn't come and live in their communities. So whereas on one hand they saw that the slavery was this horrible thing and they should be freed, but you can't come and live in my community though. So the majority of the people of the time were racist. You know, and if you stop and look at things from their time frame and the way they thought and believed, I mean, it'll come back and hit you flush in the face. You know, so we make this big point or story or whatever, however you want to say it, about how racist these guys were fighting for the South, Well, the people in the North was just as racist.
Right. That's why it's up in New York City.
Yeah.
For example. I mean, that's a great place to point to.
Yeah. So I mean, there's no when it comes to the Negro problem back then, there was no sense of fair play on either side. And, but you saw more evidence, especially when it came to the military, of a sense of fair play with the Southern Army than you did with the Northern Army. Like I say, they fought in the Northern Army in all black units with white officers and $3 less a month for pay, whereas in the Southern Army they fought together in the same unit and they received the same pay. And so, I just tell people, you do the research and figure it out for yourself. I mean, it's there. You just got to go and dig it out and read it for yourself.
Imagine this, I'm sorry.
No.
Yeah, I like to be a historian, somebody who does research. Was Lincoln killed over the issue of slavery? Is that true?
I don't know if you could say that he was killed over the issue of slavery. The Booth was a Southern sympathizer. He romanced the Southern culture. So, who knows what was going through his head when he assassinated Lincoln. You can make an argument for that case, but you can also make an argument that he was killed because of his wanting to keep the Union together no matter what the cause, when you had states that wanted to leave the Union. But even in that argument, bottom line, you could probably still make a case that it was over slavery. But if you go by what the leaders of the South were saying, it was over them having states' rights and being able to have their own sovereignty. See, that was one of the downfalls of the South, because when England and France backed out of supporting the South, Davis knew then that he had to exact taxes to raise monies to keep the army going. And when he tried to tax the states, they all refused to pay, and there was nothing he could do, because then if he tried to do something, he would be violating his own edict of states' rights.
That's right.
Yeah. See, so that was part of their downfall as well. The very thing they believed in.
Oh, wow, that's crazy. I like this as well. I mean, what is the feedback from black people? Because you first, I'm sure people might have called you an Uncle Tom or a Coon or Ruckus or Ben or Clarence, any type of those uncles. But what has been the feedback from black folks when they see you speak on these issues? Because you seem like you're very well informed and well versed, and you know how to engage your audience.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have a lot of blacks that come here and visit here, and the ones that I've had the opportunity to talk to, no, it hasn't been anything like that at all. As a matter of fact, I had a group of blacks came here and they saw the Union Jack hanging in our museum, which is what most people call the Confederate flag now. and they would tell me that they were embarrassed by that flag, and I would ask them why, and they said, well, because of what it stands for. And I said, well, what does it stand for? And they would tell me racism. And I would tell them, I said, well, I said, that was a country's flag. I said, at one time in the history of our country, we had two countries in one. And like we fight on the American flag, they fought under that flag. I said, unfortunately, in our lifetime, we saw hate groups like the KKK using that flag as their symbol, and that's all we remember of that flag. We don't know the history of the flag. All we know is what the hate group used it for. And so then, for us, the flag is racist, And they said, you're right. That's what we remember the flag from, is KKK using it, and that's why we feel the way we feel about the flag. And I said, they also used the American flag, so why don't we feel that way about the American flag? Because they used the American flag as well. Mm-hmm. And they said, well, that's a good question. We don't know. And I said, because they won. They're not going to put that stigma on their own flag. And so just that little bit of education right there kind of gave them pause to think, okay, yeah, you're right. The only time we saw that flag is when hate groups used it. We really don't know what the flag was before that. And so at least what I was able to do is get them to think about it. Because see, now when they left here, I guarantee you they went and started looking this stuff up.
Right.
For no other reason to see how right I was about it. But at least they started looking it up, and by doing that, they educated themselves. And that's my whole purpose is the education piece, is to get people to go back and do the research themselves, and then come up with their beliefs and how they feel about it. If you do the research and everything, and that research, and you're doing the true research and looking at true documents and stuff like that, and that you still walk away feeling the way you feel, then all the power to you, because at least you educated yourself and you still came out with that belief. But don't not educate yourself and come up with a belief that everybody else has told you this is the way you should believe.
I mean, it sounds like, yeah, definitely. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, I want to ask you, you said so much. I know a lot of people made the case, and I think I got to agree with them on this. When I was there last Sunday when I heard you speak, and just talking to people there, they were saying, well, you look at the history or Institute of Slavery really prospered under the American flag, the United States flag. Like, they endorsed slavery, and people made the argument that more folks died under the American flag than the Confederate flag, died, due to racism and white supremacy. Look at all the wars we fought under the American flag. And I think about the fact that you being a Marine, I remember like in May, they finally gave Sergeant Henry Lincoln Johnson of the Harlem Hellfighters his Medal of Honor after he'd been dead for decades. But his regiment was disowned by the American government.
Yes.
And they were probably the most decorated regiment from the American Expeditionary Forces. But they were disowned by their own government. They had to fight under the French flag. So you think about this stuff. I think about it. So I think about the fact that Charles Hamilton Houston, the architect of Brown v. Ford and the Minister of Thurgood Marshall, was almost lynched in his uniform by doughboys in France.
Right.
When I think about this stuff, and a black man being lynched in full uniform coming home from World War I, and even World War II in Mississippi, you had black men being lynched in uniform and being dumped in riverways and waterways down the Mississippi. And the State Department had to put a stop to it. Or I think about Isaac Woodruff in South Carolina being blinded by a sheriff while in uniform coming home from the war. World War II, it outraged Truman and Orson Welles. So I think about, what do we say about that? I mean, the American flag is just as bad, right? Think about the history, or worse, actually.
Yeah, if you think about the atrocities committed on us, and you start talking about what flag these atrocities was committed under, well, the Confederate flag was around a whole lot less than the American flag was.
Right.
And even after the Confederate flag, these people were still using the American flag while the Confederate flag was in existence, committing these atrocities. So yeah, you're right. I mean, you know, you go back. Okay, you look at the Union Army during the Civil War. Mm-hmm. Blacks couldn't serve in the same unit with whites, mm-hmm. right? And initially, when they were formed, the units were formed, they were used as teamsters and was building roadways and defensive works and stuff like that. They weren't allowed to fight.
That's right.
Okay, well, you fast forward to World War I. Blacks go in the army, they're used for the same thing. They were cooks. They were used to do menial labor. They weren't allowed to fight. Mm-hmm. This was World War I. They weren't allowed to fight. So in order to fight, they had to go to places like France and fight in that, and they were formed up in that tank unit, all black unit, and they were the most highly decorated unit in the French army. Mm-hmm. You know, but they had to go to another country to achieve that because they couldn't do it here. You know, even the Japanese in World War II, the Japanese that lived in this country and that was born and raised in this country, okay, they joined the army for the same reason, to prove that they were Americans. And that Japanese unit was the most highly decorated unit in the American Army during World War II.
Why they keep the Japanese Americans in internment camps over here?
Yeah. While their families was in internment camps.
Well, I mean, that brings a great point, because they actually got compensation or reparations for that.
Yes, they did.
You feel that Black Americans or, you know, people, I mean, just looking into the military alone, do we be getting compensation or reparations for what we've been doing in this country?
Well, you know, the thing is, we was promised, 40 acres and a mule?
That's right. Yep.
And see, the argument is now, well, we don't know whose ancestors were slaves or not, so we don't know who to give that to, because all blacks weren't slaves. Mm-hmm. And so that's what's been used not to give those reparations.
What about the Jim Crow treatment, though, after slavery, like post-Reconstruction, even during Reconstruction, and up to current day? What about that? What about that narrative?
Yeah, I mean, you stop and think about it. It was still in the South, especially where Jim Crow was so prevalent. Mm-hmm. It was still a form of slavery. The only thing that you didn't have was the open beatings and lynching. I mean, under darkness and skulking through bushes and stuff like that, people got beaten and lynched. But unlike and back in the 1800s during slavery, where you know they would lynch you in broad daylight, no matter who saw it. You know, I spoke to an African American group about a year or so ago, and we were talking about the slave mentality that still exists in black communities. Mm-hmm. Especially in a lot of your rural southern black communities. You still got a slave mentality that exists. And why is that? When slavery ended 150 years ago, well, slavery ended, but like you said, we went into a Jim Crow period. Mm-hmm. Well, if you stop and look at it, Jim Crow period only ended about 45 to 50 years ago. Mm-hmm. So that is still to the forefront in our minds. And so the fear that was instilled in us as a people is still there. You know, so that's why, especially with our parents and our grandparents and stuff, you see them acting the way that they act when they're around whites, because they lived through that period. And it's still fresh there. And that's why, you know, you still get the yasm and nosm and
right. Mr. Charlie.
Right.
I heard that in South Carolina recently.
Exactly.
What's going on, man?
Yeah, exactly. You know, I have a sister-in-law who's older than I am, and she had a white friend who was younger than her, and she was saying yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am, to this white friend. And I'm going, no, she should be saying yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, to you. You're the elder.
That's right.
But it was just the opposite.
Oh, that's crazy.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
In 1997 here, they had a big flood, and you had this black woman, elderly black woman on the roof of her house. 2 young black men come down in a boat. She wouldn't get in the boat with them. 5 minutes later, a white guy comes down in the boat, tells her to get in the boat. She immediately jumps in the boat. Later on, she was asked, why did you not get in the boat with the black man, but you got in the boat with the white man? Her answer was, everybody knows when Mr. Charlie tell you to jump, you jump.
She's done that for 400 years ago. That is an ancestral memory.
Yeah.
In the boat with the white man.
Yeah. So there's a slave mentality that still exists. And because I remember being in a forum, a community forum, and people were saying some crazy stuff in this forum, and I started speaking up, and I had blacks nudging me, come on, no, be quiet, man, be quiet, no. I said, no. You know, and so I said what I had to say, and because they was nudging me, and people saw them nudging me, trying to get me to shut up, I made sure that I brought it out. I said, well, I might get lynched tomorrow for this, but I'm gonna say this. You know,
I respect it. Yeah, I respect it.
Yeah, and people go, oh, well, Ron, nobody's gonna lynch you, and da da da. And you know, these are the white people that were there. Ain't nobody gonna lynch you. And I said, I don't know.
Right.
There sure seems to be some fear running around here that I shouldn't open my mouth.
That's
so,
right.
So somebody's got a perception somewhere, and so you know, so there's just so much education that needs to happen. And, you know, and this thing, you know, this race problem that we have in this country, it's not going to be solved with, like Clinton did it when he was president. It's not going to be solved with appointing a commission on race relations, and you have all these high-powered people sitting around the table. No, it's got to happen from the ground up. It's got to happen in the small communities up. That's the way you're going to solve it. You're not going to solve it from the top down. It's got to be solved from the bottom up, because that's where it's going to be more meaningful. It means nothing to me to have a bunch of scholars up in Washington, D.C. sitting around the table talking about it. But it does mean something for me if I'm sitting down in my community with the people I'm having the issue with, and I'm sitting across the table from them, and I'm looking them in the eye and telling them, tell me why you hate me. See what I'm saying? Because now that person has got to either tell me why he hates me or get up and walk out. Yeah. So that's where it's got to happen.
Well, it says heritage is not hate, though. It says heritage is not hate. As they say, well, you think the Confederate flag has any business flying at a state government facilities or sponsored or endorsed by the state? I mean, in your opinion.
Well, and the thing is because I am a state employee, I really can't give an answer to that. But I'll say this, that if it's historic or historical, then I don't have a problem with it. If it's in a museum or something like that, I don't have a problem with it because that's part of the history. Just like I think that it still should be taught in school. There's a lot of people trying to get that period of history taken out of schools. Right. You know, and my thing is this: if you get rid of all of that and get rid of it being taught in the school, then who do you leave the teaching of the history to? So if you already come from a family of hate and your family is teaching you the history, guess what you just did? You multiplied the hate. You multiplied the hate.
Wow, that's something to think about.
Yeah. So you know, so while all this stuff is happening, you know, we still got to look at, okay, well, who's going to teach us this history when the dust settles? And if you're saying that it's going to be taught in the homes because that's basically what it's burning down to, then if the home is already a home filled with hate, then you just multiply the hate because they're only going to be taught hate.
I don't understand that, but I also look at the fact that, I remember talking to blues great Bobby Rush. He went to a high school in Tallahassee County in Mississippi. He asked the kids what they thought about Medgar Evers, and the kids didn't know who Medgar Evers was. It was like going to Atlanta and not knowing who Dr. King was, but they're not teaching. See, I understand what they're saying about the Civil War history, but they're not really teaching a comprehensive history of anything. I mean, it's more like propaganda than anything else. And my concern is this, because I remember a story just talking to you. My freshman year in college at Washington University in St. Louis, I was talking to this big-time art school donor, because I'm an artist. And we were talking about the Civil War, and he told me, you know who my favorite person from the Civil War was? I said, who? He said, Bedford Forrest. And, I told him I was from Memphis. And this was a white guy, with Southern, I guess he was a Southern guy, white guy, has a lot of money. I'm trying to figure out why he's telling me this. Why did he share this great admiration for Nathan Bedford Forrest?
Right.
It's like, to me, telling a Jewish person I love Adolf Hitler, by the way. That's what it sounded like to me. I didn't say nothing to him about what I thought about that. I just took it all in. So was they really about heritage, or let me know what my play for it? When he mentioned it in that way.
Yeah, see, in the way that he told you, there was the latter.
Right. That's what I was thinking. It just blew my mind. I never forgot that. It stayed with me, man. It's like, I never forget it.
Yeah, he was letting you know where he stood.
Okay, I thought so. Yeah, so when people do that, you know what I'm saying? Like, to say that you're a civil rights hero because people were telling me that narrative, I'll show you the videos I recorded of people there. I wanted to talk to you, but I saw that you left that day. They told me you left. But I was saying, like, people were like, they were trying to really sell this like he was a civil rights leader, like he was real, like somebody on level of Dr. King or even a Malcolm. And these people...
No, he wasn't on those levels at all.
All right. As a black person, I didn't feel that way, Yeah. And but it was like more like apologizing for it. It was like being an apologist, and it was that's so powerful to me because they actually started believing it. And before I left, I saw a black woman. I took a picture of this. It was a black woman with little kids, and they was under 5 years old, a boy and a girl. This black woman went to the statue afterwards, and this white guy wanted to take a picture with him. They gave her the Confederate flag. They had they had watermelon in their hands, drinks with bottles of water.
Oh no!
And took a picture with the white man. And then the black woman told her kids, tell them that you love them. That disturbed me, man. I'm like, you don't even love ourselves, and you tell them you love them. I'm just saying, I don't know how you feel about it, but I took a picture of this thing. It was disturbing hearing that.
I'm glad I wasn't there to see that. Yeah, no. No. See, that's disturbing. Just having you tell me that is disturbing.
I was shocked when you came there, but then when I heard you speak, I said, this brother ain't no tongue or nothing like that. It's like he's speaking about knowledge. And I know white folks, they appreciate information. They value information more than we do as a people, which is unfortunate.
Exactly. And see, and like I say, I told them stuff that they didn't know.
I know they did. They look surprised. They surprised how you know it, though. I ain't no black folks can read the way some of them look. I ain't going to say all of them. And they don't even know your background, really. I mean, you have, I think you educated your declaration.
It was funny, though, because when Lee Miller was up talking about me when he was introducing me, and I looked around at the people and stuff, and you could see them looking around to try to figure out who is he talking about.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, when I started walking up there, and I saw some of the faces and stuff, and it was like, what? So, yeah, no, that was totally unexpected for him.
Yeah, I thought it was a boondocks. I thought it would be like boondocks, but you was no Uncle Ruckus at all, in my opinion. You didn't, you was doing all that. You just telling us like it was.
Yeah, exactly, and I appreciate that from you. No, trust me. No, I don't walk down that road that way. Because I have been known to tell people what I thought about it. And so, and when I'm having a conversation with them, and I tell them, if I think like for instance, that guy that told you his favorite person was Nathan Bedford Forrest.
Mm-hmm.
I tell people, well, that's nothing to be proud of, given some of the things that he's done. Yeah, did he do some good things? Yeah, when he was an advocate for blacks and stuff like that, yeah, he was doing some good things. But he also did some horrible things. So I wouldn't be going around being proud of him the way that you're espousing to be proud of him.
Yeah, I also was disturbing too, the fear, like you talking about the fear of black folks. We in a majority black town. I don't think black folks felt safe enough to come down to that park last Sunday. I remember white folks coming to me, taking my hand like this motorcycle guy. Hey, how you doing, man? It's good to see you. Yeah. Okay. And then like people saying, you're not afraid of us. I pay taxes here. This is my problem. My problem. I pay taxes in this city. Why would I be afraid to come to a public place?
Exactly.
I'm saying with the majority black town, what do you think about that? Black folks say, it's strange. And then a lot of black folks don't even know that statue there or who that guy is and who's buried there. They live in the city all their life. They don't even know about that.
Yeah, all they know is a big statue with a horse on it.
That's about it.
Yeah. Well, and those guys on the motorcycles from my neck of the woods up here.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, they came from Paducah, Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
I know most of them.
And I know they respect you, though. So they know they've been to the site and stuff. They probably was taking them back at first, but they know you got the knowledge.
Right. Well, see, I've given that presentation to them before.
Mm-hmm.
About 3 or 4 years ago. Okay. That's how I know them all. And so the and I've been to several places giving that. I gave it in Huntsville, Alabama. 250 people.
I saw that online. Yeah, but you a Marine though. You a soldier though, man. You don't know no fear. You train yourself. You a soldier, man. You been in Vietnam and stuff, so you know how.
Yeah. Well, I just look at it this way. If you're gonna do something to me, you're gonna do it to me whether I'm hiding in my home or not.
That's right.
So if you're gonna do something to me, or try to do something to me, then let's do it in public where everybody else sees it too.
Mm-hmm.
And but I'm not going to shy away from you out of fear. I've gone through too much for that. And I'm not going to go out there and create a scene or start something and create something. No, mm-hmm. I'm not about that either. But don't step on my toes, and expect me to bow down and say yes, sir, because that ain't happening. But no, I do this, from the educational piece because I want people to understand and know the truth. And if the truth is that, you're straight up a Klansman, and that's all you are, and that's what you stood for, then I'm going to say that.
Mm-hmm.
With the presentation I did there, it was so important to them because I don't normally put Nathan Bedford Forrest in my Jefferson Davis presentation.
Right.
But the people that put this thing on wanted me to talk about the relationship between Davis and Forrest. Well, the only time they met was when Davis was the president of an insurance company in Memphis.
Mm-hmm.
And Forrest worked for an insurance company at the same time. And that's how they met, and they became friends. But when Davis was a president and Forrest was a general, they never met. As a matter of fact, everything that the generals in the Western Theater told Davis about Forrest made Davis not care for the man because he believed what his generals told him. And and then after he met him, he started believing differently. But I'm gonna, just like I tell people, Davis lived and died unrepentant in his belief in states' rights and slavery. Davis believed in slavery, and I tell people that, but he also believed that slaves would be free one day, and and they should be educated, and so they can make a living for themselves. You know, he believed that too. See, the whole thing is just so complicated. You know, because you sit there and you go, you take a Davis and a Forrest. So you got Davis, who went to his deathbed believing in slavery and states' rights, but yet he believed that slaves would be free and they should be educated. You know, well, if he could have also believed, well, yeah, they're going to be free, and so if they be free, you know, let them make it on their own. I don't care. They're my slaves. Mm-hmm. But that wasn't his thought process. His thought process was they needed to be educated so they can take care of themselves. Forrest, the atrocities of Fort Pillow. Mm-hmm. You know, but yet he turns around and he's an advocate for African Americans. And here he is responsible for massacring a bunch of African Americans. Now, could that be because he had some great spiritual revelation and turned? Could it be for Davis about educating the slaves that he believed that if they weren't educated, they were going to be a blight on society? Mm-hmm. I don't know. But I find it interesting that, you know, both men thought one way but acted another. You know, and I would never espouse that Forrest was a hero for African Americans. No, you'll never get me to say that. Right. You know, but the fact of the matter is, he did advocate for blacks. He did talk to the national pallbearers, which was the forerunners of the NAACP, and talked about equality and talked about wages and work and equal pay, equal work. He did do all those things. So, you know, so how do you interpret that? You know, and does one outweigh the other?
I think that my thing is this. I don't mean to cut you off, but I just want to add this. When they say inheritance not a hate, well, tell the truth, because a lot of whites to me are very delusional about history. It's more propagandic because you said Davis espoused education for the slaves. Well, truth be told, the most skilled labor force coming out of the Civil War were former enslaved Africans. Yeah, they were the carpenters. They were the farmers. They were the engineers and scientists. I mean, Thomas Jefferson had a best friend by the name of Benjamin Banneker. We built this country. So slavery, I mean, Wall Street was built by slaves, and they were traded as commodities. So what I'm saying is, none of this exists without black labor, which created white wealth. None of this exists without us. They never paid us our wages. They come about $15 an hour. They never paid our ancestors anything to build this country.
Right, and that's what Forrest was talking about when he talked to that black group. He talked about those very same things you just said. Mm-hmm. All the skilled workers were blacks coming out of slavery because they did all that stuff. They knew all that stuff. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You know, I just think that bottom line, there's a lot of education that has to happen, and the education that we're getting right now is not the education we need to be getting. You know, we need to take care of the race issue that we have in this country, and it needs to be taken care of from the bottom up. And that can only happen in the individual communities. It can't happen from the president's office.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it can't happen from the governor's office. It's got to go beneath lower than that. And so, you know, James Baldwin, you know, said it in his book, The Fire Next Time. You know, and when he said that if that conscious few white folks and that conscious few black folks come together, then they can make the change.
Yes, sir. Well, Brother Sydnor, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that was it.
And I was going to ask you before I let you go, I thoroughly enjoyed this, man, because I was actually thinking about traveling up there to Kentucky to see you. I wasn't sure if y'all was open or not. I know you said 9 to 5, but I'm known for traveling. Yeah, 7 days a week, 9 to 5, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I want to know what you would say. Cause, I mean, you're very, I'm glad I didn't go about looks as far as the perception. So the reality is that you're very insightful, you're very confident in your skin, brother. And you understand what's going on. But I want to know what you would have told that sister who had her kids posing the Confederate flag with watermelon and water bottles for a statue. What would you told that sister who told her kids to love that white guy that was posing with them and the way they were posing? What would you say to that sister?
Well, I think the first thing I would have probably asked her is why are you belittling yourself and your children? And then, because that would have gotten her attention. Mm-hmm. And then after that, I think I would have been able to get her off to the side and just have a conversation with her and try to impart with her that, we are a proud people, and we don't need to be put in a situation where it looks like we're a Mammy or an Uncle Tom to have those people like us or feel comfortable being around us. We can be ourselves, and if they can't accept us the way that we are, then maybe we shouldn't be associated with each other. But I would tell her, I would talk to her about Sankofa, and remember your roots, remember where you come from, and don't belittle yourself to be accepted.
That's fair.
And don't create a situation where your kids feel like that's what they've got to do to be accepted, and that's what they've got to do to succeed. Because it's not. What they need to do to be accepted and to succeed is to educate themselves. Mm-hmm. Because that's the one thing that can't be taken away from you. That was the one thing that the slaveholders feared the most is slaves being educated, because they knew that if they were educated, they would come out of the darkness and they would see what's going on around them, and education breeds discontent. If you start to look at the slave uprising, the famous slave uprisings that happened, Nat Turner and all of those guys, well, you stop and think about it. Each one of those guys that led those slave uprisings were educated slaves. They were slaves that had been educated.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying? Now, one of the things that they did when they created the slave, if you will, they kept them in the dark. They created a system where they were telling each other. So they created a system where if you have a field slave, you turn them against a house slave and vice versa. If you have a dark-skinned slave, you turn them against a light-skinned slave and vice versa. A kinky-haired slave, you turn them against a straight-haired slave and vice versa. That's why in my lifetime, especially back in the 60s, if you had a dark-skinned brother try to talk to a light-skinned sister, she would go, "Oh, no, I don't want my baby to come out burnt. Get away from me." Right. Or if you had a kinky-haired brother try to talk to a sister, she goes, "No, I want my baby to have good hair." Where do you think it came from? It came from that. It came from that, and so we need to know these things, and because those are the things that has gotten us where we are now, where we don't trust each other as a people. And the guy that taught these slave owners this method and stuff told them, if you do this the way I'm telling you to do it, it will be perpetual for 213 years. Well, it's been 214 years and we're still doing it.
Oh, yes, sir. Why did you accept the invitation to speak at Forest Park last Sunday?
Why did I accept it?
Mm-hmm.
Well, Lee Miller and his band, they come up here every year and play for our Jefferson Davis birthday commemoration. And so he asked me if I would be willing to come and speak, and I told him sure, I'd come and speak.
And also, I want to ask you too: do you feel like it was like a propaganda thing, like a PR move, since it was going on in the country with the Confederate flag backlash, or you think it was just genuine?
No, I think it was genuine, because when he asked me if I would come down and speak, it was about a year or so ago. Okay. He asked me that, so it was before all this happened. So I don't think it was a propaganda move. I think it was genuine.
Brother Ron Sydnor, I want to thank you so much. You are the head historian and past manager of the Jefferson Davis Historic Site in Fairview, Kentucky. And I also just want to thank you for taking the time to educate us all, and we all be. And in the words of Great Together, we love you madly, and keep on producing and pushing, sir.
Well, thank you for having me.
It's an honor. And I'll make a visit up there very soon to meet you.
Do so.
Yes, sir. I'm excited, man. Thank you. Yeah. It's an honor.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, sir. You have a great day.
You too.
Thank you. I will. All right.
Bye-bye.